So you and I met at Hitch's memorial.
Mm.
I'm surprised it took so long for us to meet because we were in
Yeah.
similar circles for a while as
Yes.
voluble atheists.
I
But
was the groom to the Four Horsemen,
yeah, that's right.
or the ostler, just sort of holding the reins. But
Yeah.
off you go, sirs. You go and gallop off and spread the news. I'll be back here with a point for you when you're on your way back.
Well, yeah. So that's I should probably flag that at the outset here. So the nominal pretext for our conversation is that we're releasing the book version of the conversation, the Four Horsemen conversation that Hitch, Richard Dawkins, Dan Dennett, and I had in 2007, which was recorded happily. Really was recorded as an afterthought. We almost did. We just got together in Hitch's apartment and
Yes, filmed in his DC apartment.
yeah,
Wasn't it?
yeah. And I was surprised to realize that was actually the only conversation the four of us ever had. It's counterintuitive even to me, but
Yes.
knowing my own life, but I'm sure it will be counterintuitive to the people who hear this. And so we refined the transcript of that conversation, and then each wrote introductory essays, and you were generous enough to write a foreword to it. And so that's coming out in, I believe, March. Obviously, it's available on Amazon now for pre-order, and we're shamelessly plugging this here. All the proceeds go to the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science, which I believe is now joined at the hip with the Center for
It
Inquiry.
is indeed. They
Yeah.
very kindly gave me an award at Las Vegas this year. So
nice.
I went to meet, but yeah, they're fused
Yeah,
as one body.
well done.
And it's worth remembering that at that time, you four were characterized as the new atheists. There was this idea of a new atheism, a rather more intellectually rigorous, open, free-thinking, unafraid way of addressing secularity, humanism, and the burdens and torments that religion was imposing on the world. And 2007 isn't that long ago, and yet we have to remember that's the year the iPhone came out. It's
Right.
the year Twitter came out. This is a lot has changed since then, and it's fascinating to hear and watch you four talking about the world and wondering whether this has been made irrelevant by the rise of social media and the rise of all the things that have risen since then. But actually, one finds that, as I think I say in the introduction, that talking about religion and the dangers of accepting religion or being bound by religion or allowing religious doctrine to inform policy and to be sort of unquestioned in government and the world, that the dangers of that are as apparent now as they were then, and they actually leach outside, and things become a subset of religion in a way that are just as important. The same kind of heresies and blasphemies, no longer pertaining to God and Jesus and Allah, but pertaining to gender politics and to all kinds of other issues now.
Mm.
And we're still in the same position of thinking, gosh, there are still inquisitions, there are still auto de fes, that there you see people falling, tumbling, disgraced because they've said something heretical, or foolish, and it's actually greater now than it was in 2007 when the power of religion was still strong then, and the church, and particularly the Roman Church, but also evangelical Christianity in this country, the United States, where we're speaking, was on the rise. The Tea Party and all those things were beginning to happen. But
I wouldn't count religion out just
No,
yet. I think,
quite.
we see the pendulum keep swinging, but yeah, you're right to see the parallel with this new orthodoxy of political correctness, which was, has always been a term and a concept, at least for the last few decades. But this is really a front on which Hitch is so dearly missed. I mean, I've on more than 100 occasions, I'm sure I have thought, man, wouldn't it be great for Hitch to respond to this this horror that just appeared. Actually, I'm now painfully aware that we actually haven't touched on how you met Hitch or
he was a man who was not interested in sport at all.
No. Wait, so how far back did you go with him?
It goes back to the Hay on Wye Literary Festival. There's a little village on the borders of Wales and England called Hay on Wye, or Way on High, as I call it. And I'm actually the president of the literary festival now, but it's a huge literary festival for this tiny little town that was famous for having dozens of bookshops, all owned by the same man. He just bought new cafes bought the
Oh, really?
cinema,
Nice.
turned the cinema into a bookshop. Everywhere is a bookshop. And so this, about 30 years ago, a literary festival started up. And I used to, do things there, both readings of my own books if I was writing at the time, and also moderate at platform events and various things. And the Hitch also, he came over to do a lot of them. With his friend Martin Amis,
Yeah.
do interviews, and he'd be there with his pint mug full of Black Label whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
and do 3 or 4. And we did debates together. We did one on religion. It wasn't quite on religion. It was on whether or not, despite its untruth, or at least the inability to prove any of the basic tenets of most religions, that there might be something useful in liturgy and devotion and piety.
Was that an intelligence squared debate?
No, it wasn't. This was just a Hay on Why one. We later did an
right.
intelligence squared debate about
which is wonderful.
Catholic
That's
Church.
available online.
Yes, which is on YouTube, and we got on straight away. We shared a devotion to the writer P.G. Wodehouse. He was able to quote him at great length, and we would have fun with that. So we called each other Old Horse, which I still do with his widow Carol Blue. She calls me Old Horse, which is a Woodhouseian apostrophe. And we just hit it off straight away.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Gosh, no, I was in the late 90s, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd see him a lot when he came to Wales or to Britain. I'd see him, but not often enough. Saw him a couple of times in Washington and around different parts of the world where he would pop up. And he genuinely extraordinary figure, because very rarely do you get together that mix of sheer breathtaking articulacy, memory, frame of reference is endless. I mean, certainly in political writing and social writing, in the history of religion and theology and various things. He had his gaps, including music and sport, for example. He was not particularly strong on those, but he, together with that wit and speed of reflex and a sense of energetic enjoyment, so that when I think the reason he's still so popular on YouTube for generations who are now young enough almost not to have been contemporaneous with him at all, because they're enlivened by him because of the relish. And I think that's a kind of forgotten aspect of it. He relished the fight. He relished intellectual argument. He relished opposition. He relished the opportunity to express himself, to put someone down often, yes, but also, I would say that, the two most scary forms of politeness are the American officer when you arrive with your passport and your green card, and the way they say "sir" is the most aggressive word you've ever heard in your life. That asshole would be far more preferable. Sir, do not talk to me. Sir, do not talk. Sir, thank you. And similarly, Hitch had one as well, which he would call people sir or madam when he was debating with them. Sir, and you just knew that they were going to be torn to pieces. It's a bit like the right-wing equivalent is Rush Limbaugh calling people my friend, which always makes you kind of go, don't you dare call me. Well, now, my friend, you just know they're a right-wing shock jock when they talk like that. But no, a hugely missed figure, hugely missed for that as much as anything. And of course, he died before his time. And that relish I spoke of that he brought to debate, he brought to alcohol and feasting and, his whole way. And it got to him because there was a price to be paid at the end for all that smoking and drinking, I'm afraid. And I don't think anyone can doubt that his death was a direct lifestyle death rather than just bad luck. But I'd urge anyone who got a spare afternoon, there are certain things that are more fun than they should be about YouTube, which one ought to deprecate. But and that is, you can just say, I'm going to have a Bertrand Russell evening, and you can literally, because he was interviewed enough on film for you to,
I know, it's amazing,
chase through for hours and think, wow. And you can do it with Richard Feynman, or you can do it with Hitch. You just one little clip leads to another and another and another, and you end up celebrating this passion for reason and argument and getting to the bottom of things, and for not allowing sloppy thinking and not allowing lazy cliche assumptions to prevail, but for constantly refining and refining. And it meant that he made enemies, of course, as people always do in the intellectual world, more from his own kind than from his natural opposition, because of his support of the war on terror, so-called,
Right.
and other such things. But you, how well did you know him?
I met him in 2007, just as he was getting ready to publish God Is Not Great.
Yeah.
And we were allies in the publishing phenomenon of that book. And we did 2 debates together where we were, on the same, happily on the same side of the dais. Then we had, this Four Horsemen conversation. And we, had dinner, a couple of other times, and largely an email correspondence when we're not in the same city. So I did feel, personally robbed of the opportunity to grow old with him. I mean, because he was such good company, and I'd only known him for really, it was 4 years, and the last 4 years of his life. But yeah, that really it was so interesting to see that quality in him that you describe here, and you describe well in the foreword to this book, just the relish he took in those moments of combativeness and the fun he was having in debate. I've simply never found that gear in my own mind. It's just like when I'm in a debate, I think it's also because I've never approached debate, even no matter how formally it's been framed, in my own mind. I mean, I think this is probably a fault, but I don't actually approach it as a game to be played. I approach it as a conversation, and the more I find myself at loggerheads with the opposition, the negative emotion that begins to energize me is impatience, annoyance.
Yes.
Why can't they get the point, or why can't they admit what is obviously true, or we know to be true? And it's anger, but for me, it's a kind of dispiriting anger, and a divisive anger.
A source of
and
more.
Hitch is just having, it's just his is part of it, I think, was just histrionic. I mean, he was not as angry as he was seeming to be in certain moments. He was just good fun. It was like he realized that his outbursts of anger were good theater, and he just wanted to. He was entertaining in addition to delivering the ideas there.
I remember teasing him when he discovered that he was in fact Jewish, that he hadn't known, that it was hidden from him, which I am too, in as much as my mother is Jewish, so that sort of counts in terms of a racial thing, if not
whether you like it or not.
I'm
you're
not
Jewish.
Judaic, but and I said, you see, that fits exactly, Christopher, into your disputation deep within the Jewish people. You've got to argue about everything, and arguing for the sake of it is a pleasure and a fun. I remember there was a chess cafe in Hampstead when I was growing up in North London, and I used to take friends to it. I said, you hear this bus going past us? And they go, yes. I said, this street is not as loud as a lot of old Jews playing chess. And then I'd open the door of the chess cafe, and you'd hear this, hey, what do you know? Banging pieces down and shouting. And I said, this is where it all happens. This is disputation central. And so between parliamentarian adversarial, debating styles, which are a very British kind of way of doing things, and that disputatious spirit, he was more energized than, as you rightly said, dispirited by people not getting it, or being just, blocking.
The drinking was another component of this, because the drinking, I think it's hard to be totally idealistic about how much he drank. I mean, he was obviously incredibly functional while drinking that much, in a way that few people would be. But I just remember the one experience, I think I wrote about this somewhere, but the one experience I had where it just proved to me that he was a different species than I am. We were out, I think, until 1 a.m. after a dinner where I dropped him off at his hotel, and he was just hammered, and clearly he was not intending to go to sleep at that point. He had his evening, had some while yet to run, but I knew he had to be on a panel at 9 a.m. at I think it was the UCLA Literary Book Festival, and I woke up at 5 minutes to 9 with just fully hungover, just a pounding headache, and I turned on the television just because it was being televised, I think, on C-SPAN, just out of morbid curiosity to see how bedraggled he would
Yeah.
look. At that point, I didn't know him well enough at that point to know what I should have expected. He was just absolutely lucid and just holding forth on the
And
panel.
may
and
well
it was-
have filed a 1,200 word piece of copy that night after
Right.
saying goodbye
Yeah.
to you in the elevator. You know,
Yeah, it's just
because
nuts.
that's the legend of him. And if people don't know him and who are listening, what would we recommend they read? Well, God is Not Great. There's one. Letters to a Young Contrarian is a marvelous way
it's
to
a lovely
start,
book.
because it gives you a sense of his sense of what being a contrarian means, and the way to look at the world and assumptions. It's a good figure.
Also, the audio book of Hitch 22
Yeah,
is
his autobiography.
it's fantastic to hear him read his books. He reads God is Not Great as well, but Hitch 22 his memoir is wonderful because it just gives you a sense of just how many different scenes he was in and
That
the
extraordinary
breadth of
world he
his
came
life,
out of, that sort of street political world of the 60s, that to us is history, that he lived through, that the 1968 in Paris and Vietnam, Cyprus, Central America, all those flashpoints. He actually visited them, and as an unrepentant Trotskyist, as he would call himself, he disavowed Trotskyite.